Good morning. For those of you who do not know me, my name is J.W. Park, and I'm your district superintendent. Then you may ask the question, what is a district superintendent? So I'm kind of a person supervise and manage the churches and the pastors in my district. That is called Central Maryland District. That covers upper half of the Montgomery County, from Route 28 to all the way up to Frederick County, southern strips of Frederick County, and then southern strips of Carroll County, and west side of 95 of Howard County. So that is our district, and you belong to Central Maryland District. And there are about 77 churches in our district, and then I'm in charge of maintaining churches and the pastors in my district, so that's who I am. And I was invited today to talk about the very important issues. I would not like to call this just an issue because we are talking about people. So, in other words, that LGBTQNI, so that means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, what the Q stand for? Queer, inquiring, and all these initials. But this is about the people with the those group in margin in our society. This February 23rd of February this year, there will be a special general conference. It will be held for about 3-4 days. And there are about 820 some delegation from all over the world of a United Methodist Church, including United States, Africa, Europe, Eurasia, Philippines. So all those people are representing their conference and come, and then they have a discussion, study, and then finally vote on how we are going to do our church business, church work around those issues. So let me just go back to just brief historical fact, and then I'll explain what is before us. And then, as time permits, we'll have a question and answer. So back in 1972, at one of the general conference, there was a group of people brought a legislature saying that they would like to put a paragraph in our Book of Discipline. So I brought a Book of Discipline in 2016 edition. So every 4 years, a general conference, which is a supreme decision-making body of the United Methodist Church, meeting, and they decide what to put and what to remove from Book of Discipline. And then that's what those 826 or some delegations from all over the world do. So United Methodist Church is quite similar to United States government structure. So United States government has a 3 parts, right? And then United States government has a Congress, that is the legislative body, and then a White House and all the federal government, that is executive branch under the President of the United States. And then Supreme Court, that's a legal part, that is a judicial part. United Methodist Church has a pretty similar structure. General Conference is a legislative body. And Council of Bishops and general agencies are more of an executive body. And then lastly, the Judicial Council is the legal part. So those 3 branches are independent and separation of powers. However, who can speak for the United Methodist Church? Not an individual pastor, not a bishop, but it is a general conference as a body. So they can only speak for the United Methodist Church. And that's why we gather every 4 years to decide who we are, what to do. And then back in 2016 General Conference, the General Conference could not decide what we are going to do around the issue of LGBTQI. So they asked the Council of Bishops to form a commission to study and bring forth a recommendation to the Council of Bishops. And then it will be up to the General Conference whether we accept one of those reports or we do not take any, so whatever it comes. So before us, there are officially 3 resolutions, 3 options that we can take as a denomination. Those are, do you have a paper with you? I wonder whether you have a chance to distribute those papers of the options. I know that some of you have been here came to our one of many opportunities, but let me just explain what are those. So there are 3 options that General Conference is faced with. First, one church plan. Second, connectional conference plan. Third, traditional plan. So our church, as a United Methodist Church, is a very broad in many ways and very diverse church. One end of the spectrum is very conservative, traditional believers. Another end is very progressive / liberal believers. In the middle, there are people who are rather on the center. We call them centrist. So those 3 groups of believers within the United Methodist Church didn't know what to do about the differences that they have. So in brief words, what the one church plan means is we recognize everybody believe in different ways. Even among the siblings, even between the couple, they all believe in a different way. I'm not talking about whether they believe in Jesus Christ or not. It is one thing. The truth is clear. But specifically about the issue of human sexuality. So, one church plan means we understand and recognize the differences. However, we are all called to be the body of Christ, called United Methodist Church. So we would allow everybody to be who they want to be in terms of those issues. So in other words, we'll maintain as a one church. There will be no schism. We'll just stay together as a one church, but we'll allow each pastors, each church, each annual conference be who they want to be. So in other words, let's say St. Paul United Methodist Church and Mount Carmel United Methodist Church wants to stay within the United Methodist Church, and then they want to accept each other of what they believe regards to this LGBTQI issue. However, we as a denomination would not force what to do for each church. So let's say St. Paul wants to remain as a rather progressive church, and we would like to accept person of LGBTQI, and we would like to allow our pastor to perform a same-sex marriage in our church. Then you can do it. The John Wesley Church on the other side of town, which happened to be very traditional, and they decide, no, we are not going to allow our church to perform a same-sex marriage. We would rather not see our pastor perform same-sex marriage within our church property. One church plan allows all these. So we would rather not force each other to do what we like to do, but will remain as a one church. And that's why I call it one church plan. Second option, suggestion that came from the Commissioner Way Forward is connectional conference plan. So that means we understand there is a difference. So rather than try to put everybody together, we would rather be separated into three groups. One, progressive, liberal. Another, very traditional, conservative. Third, centrist. And then in how we do that, that's the part that everybody scratch their head. So, for example, let's say there are 2 or 3 churches in a same town. One church wants to be a traditional church. Another church wants to be a very progressive church. They used to be in the same district because they are in the same area. But if connectional church plan is, conference plan is adopted, they will choose to belong to which conference. So let's say Baltimore Washington Annual Conference, which we belong to, decide to be rather progressive, liberal conference. And then John Wesley Church is not going to be progressive church. And they can choose to become a member of, for example, Susquehanna Conference, that is in central Pennsylvania area, or western Pennsylvania, or even somewhere all the way down to Georgia or somewhere. They want to affiliate themselves and become a member of a conference that they feel comfortable with. If it happens, what's going to happen is, within the same town, there are a few churches, and one church could belong to Baltimore Washington Conference, another church could belong to conference in California, another church could belong to some churches, on annual conference in southern part of the United States. In practicality, how are we going to manage churches? I think it's a near impossibility because they decide who they want to belong. And then let's say there's a church conference. The district superintendent has to come and do the church conference. And they may end up having a district superintendent from California to come and do it. And how are we going to organize ourselves? I don't know how we are able to handle it. However, the idea is, well, we recognize everybody's different, so let's just go our own way and be who we want to be. Third option is traditional plan. That means that we want to be traditional people. So we want to go back what's in the Book of Discipline saying the practice of homosexuality is not compatible with Christian and biblical teaching. So we are not going to allow same-sex marriage. We are not going to ordain a self-avowed practicing homosexual as an ordained clergy. So what if anybody break that rule? Then we are going to punish those people, those church. Currently, we all have a covenant with the church that will uphold the Book of Discipline. That contains the paragraph, the practice of homosexuality is not compatible with the biblical teaching. That paragraph is still valid. So I, as an ordained elder, cannot perform same-sex marriage within our United Methodist Church. And outside the United Methodist Church, I cannot do it because I, as an ordained clergy of United Methodist Church, cannot break the book of discipline. And if I say I am a practicing self-avowed, which means I openly say, publicly mention, hey, I'm a gay person. Practicing, and I have a partner. I'm living with a partner in my house. Homosexual. If I say so, then my order will be annulled, and my credential will be taken away. However, if I have an homosexual orientation in my sexuality, but not practicing, I'm a single person, and I never engage any homosexual activities, but I recognize myself as a gay person, then I can still remain in my ordination and become a ordained clergy. So currently, that's what our denomination is. Traditional plan is, let's stick with that. And however, we want to put some teeth in there. Anybody break that, we're going to take their credential away. We're going to make that church pay the price if they break it. However, all these things does not include a lay person. It is only about clergy and a same-sex marriage. Of course, in that case, it includes a lay person. So currently, if any gay couple, lesbian couple come to me and ask me, Pastor J.W., we love each other. We like to get married here. Can you marry us? Then what I can say is, that's wonderful, but I'm sorry, I cannot marry you. In our church, as well as outside the church, because if I do, I'm breaking my covenant with the church. So, the main thing is a progressive and liberal group of people within the United Methodist Church and a very traditional and conservative group of people in the United Methodist Church are butting heads each other. It has been at least since 1972. So how many years? Over 40 years. Over 4 decades, we've been talking about this, we've been discussing about this, we've been praying about this, we've been fighting about this. Every general conference. So I have been a general conference delegate in 2012 and 2016, 2 times. These issues always came up. And I had been a member in the subgroup called Church and Order, Church and Society group. That is basically talking about this issue with LGBTQI. We've been discussed, we've been quarreling, we've been praying together. We couldn't come up with any solution. And that's why at 2016 General Conference, the General Conference asked the Council Bishop to come up with commission to bring forth to us about recommendation. And these 3 recommendations are before us. And then, what we learned at 2016 General Conference was there was an attempt of removing the guaranteed appointment for ordained elders. That means we have a covenant within our church. Once you are ordained as an elder, you are guaranteed to get a full-time appointment. So it is more like a tenure for the teaching. And let's say anybody, faculty in the universities and colleges, and if you get a tenure, unless you commit a very serious thing, you will stay as a professor. That's the same idea basically. And then there was an attempt to remove that because sometimes once you become an ordained elder, sometimes you become complacent and not doing your 100% effort because you are comfortable. So we passed that legislation, but Judicial Council, as a Supreme Court in our church, came out, hey, it is unconstitutional. So we couldn't reinforce that. So we learned from that experience and said, hey, there are three options that the Commissioner Way Forward brought forth. Let's double check whether it is a constitutional. So those three are constitutional. So Judicial Council took a look at it and they ruled out their ruling. One church plan is, most of it are constitutional. Connectional Conference plan is mostly unconstitutional. Traditional plan, there are some parts that is not constitutional. For example, putting teeth in this traditional plan is not constitutional, because if you're going to punish anybody within our denomination according to for the issue of human sexuality, then you have to illustrate and list all those things that can make a person committing disobeying the book of discipline. For example, if you're going to put anybody break this issue of human sexuality, they have to either surrender their credential, and then you could illustrate something like anybody steal, anybody commit adultery, anybody do whatever it is not a good thing. So you cannot just handpick one or two things and make it as the punishment. So what happened here now is, after the ruling came out, each group of people who came up with these three plans, they polish it, repair it, make it constitutional. So they, for one church plan, is pretty much good to go. Connectional Conference plan, there are so many parts that they have to repair. I don't know how it's going to go. And I haven't heard much about this Connectional Conference plan. Traditional plan, however, they came up with modified traditional plan. So right now, those three plans are still in front of the General Conference, and there are some other plans. For example, simple plan. That is, let's just go back to pre-1972 and just simply remove that paragraph condemning the issue of homosexuality, and just leave it as it is. And then we don't need to blame each other. So those 4 or 5 plans are before the General Conference. And February 23 of this year, there will be about 820 some delegates gathered. We'll start with a prayer and then have what's going to happen, how we're going to go. So usually there are several subcommittees when the General Conference happens. But this year, it is a special General Conference to deal with only one legislation, that is about the issue of LGBTQI, human sexuality. So they are saying all 820 some delegates will be in one committee, only deal with this. So they are set some ground rules and how we're going to do. So, but having over 800 people in one committee and continue on, I don't know how it's going to go. It's going to be quite interesting. I have been in General Conference twice. That is such an, I don't know how to put it, but just, it's very hard to do. So, this is up to now what happened, and I just explained it in a very short way because I don't want to take up too much time. But there is no good question, there is not so good question, so feel free to ask any question. There are parts that I missed, or parts that I haven't mentioned. If you have any question, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer your question. So, any question? Yes?
So am I understanding there would be one church and
So one church plan will remove all those condemning language from the Book of Discipline. And then it is similar to a simple plan. However, it explains some more in detail how those three groups in general within our United Methodist Church going to react or get along with each other. Connectional Conference plan does not have one Book of Discipline. So the idea is three parts, three groups of the people will have their own Book of Discipline. So in other words, there will be part one of Book of Discipline that talks about our article of religion and constitutional stuff. And then part two talks about ordination of a pastor, election of bishops, and let's say about the same-sex marriage and LGBTQ&I issue. So those three groups will have a different Book of Discipline, part two, to each of the group. And traditional plan will have a one, or they will have a pretty similar Book of Discipline as to what we have now. So in terms of Book of Discipline, that's how it's going to go. Thank you. Any other question? Yes.
So, thank you. I mean, you really laid it out quite a bit. So, if the church did go with the one church plan, then what kind of changes would there actually be that St. Paul, for instance, would need to make? I mean, when I read about this a year ago, there were some differences in actions, and it seemed like there was signage that got put up to say you were a certain kind of church, or there might be some electronic notices that went out as some community things. Because, I mean, many of us think we are a welcoming church already. So, does anything change, or do we need to take those kind of physical, invisible actions as well?
So that's a good question. What kind of impact would make to the local church? If the one church plan is adopted, there will be no change. You don't need to do anything. You could just remain as you are. Say, St. Paul is a rather progressive church, as I understand, and then you just remain as it is. Only change is if your congregation and your pastor agree to have a same-sex marriage in your property, you can do that. If you decide not to do it, you could decide it as a congregation. So there is a complete freedom. Each of the local church could decide what you want to do. And then the possible friction could be majority of the congregation wants to be open to the LGBTQ&I community and have a same-sex marriage. However, if your pastor is not agreeing to that, what's going to happen? Then there got to be some negotiation, got to be some mutual understanding, and if it doesn't work, maybe there might be a need for a appointment change. Because obviously, majority of the congregation and the pastor are not seeing each other eye to eye. Then if it is becomes a very important issue, then we are not going to let it continue on, because that will impact the congregation as well as the pastor. And that we're already doing it now. So the district superintendent ask for the church profile, and then each district superintendent should know their church. I know all 77 churches in my district pretty much. Maybe not as intimate as their own pastor. So what's going to happen is, hey, St. Paul, they may not go well with a very conservative traditional pastor. Then I'm not going to ask the bishop to appoint the pastor like that. But at the same time, am I going to appoint a very liberal person to St. Paul? Maybe not, because not everybody in St. Paul are the same way. And one other thing is, every pastor should be able to pastor a congregation, members, and everybody, and one extreme to another. So I, as a pastor, if and when I'm appointed to a local church again, I cannot insist, hey, people, this is what I believe. You should follow me. No. You should not do that. I'm open to any idea, any opinion, and I'll continue to be the pastor for everybody. I, as an ordained person, cannot pick and choose which way I want to be. Of course, Book of Discipline would be the guideline, but I'm not going to insist on my own way. I have to be a pastor for everybody. So that's how it is. I mean, I hope that answered your question.
Well, actually, maybe I have a follow-up question. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I want to do a follow-up question.
Please.
So I'm trying to understand within the structure of what you just outlined. You then bumped the one church plan isn't really what I thought was a one church plan, because I thought that would be a decision within the conference and then the churches would just accept it. But you're saying that there would actually be a decision with each individual church. So then is there a structure that's then set up so like you have to have a 50% vote of the people who are the members of the congregation to do it? So if there's 100 members, you need 51 to say yes, you can do this. I mean, does that then create sort of an individual, rather loud conversation in each church? I see that as...
So that's a very good point. So there are already people pointing that out. Hey, it's not fair to put each local church in that spot. And who knows, there might be a disagreement within the local church. And that sort of maximize the division or friction by putting the local church in that situation. I agree. And that's the stuff that needs to be ironed out if and when the one church plan is approved. But I do hope, but in reality, there are many churches struggle with that issue already anyway. So, for example, the church that I used to serve before I became a DS, one side of the church congregation is quite liberal. They like to say, hey, we want to make our church announce it as a reconciling congregation, which means that we accept LGBTQI and we would like to perform a same-sex marriage in our church, even though the Book of Discipline does not allow. So it is like a conscientious objection, so to speak, in order to change the Book of Discipline and our whole denomination's culture. And then, and on the other side, there are quite conservative people, traditional people. And they said, hey, if the church announced that and made a decision, I may leave my church because I cannot agree with that. So I, as a pastor, what I did was, it's all good, but you know what? The more important thing is we believe in Jesus Christ, and we made a body of Christ as a church. Can we not say that, but recognize each other's difference and stay together? So the progressive liberal part of the congregation decide not to do it, not to pursue it. Rather, they try to work on their differences and understand and agree to disagree. So they are in harmony, they are peaceful, they put their all effort for fellowship, worship, and mission and outreach. However, not all the church may go that way if this becomes a sticking point. And there should be some work to be done. In the end, if it doesn't work, well, the solution might be separation. And that's what's happening these days anyway. So that's why I said there should not be much of a difference from now on if and when one church plan is adopted. Because let's say very conservative people step in to St. Paul and realize in a month later, wow, this congregation is quite progressive. I don't like it. And he or she may leave the church. Vice versa. Any local church, as they come to the church for the first time as a visitor, and they sense the culture of the church, and they eventually decide whether they want to stay or not. And that's what's happening now these days. Unless you're born into this church, and your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father, and you yourself have been a member of this church, and no matter what, I'm not leaving this church, then you will stay. So each individual person eventually decide what they want to do, and that has been the way so far. So I hope that answered your question. It's a very short question, but long answer. Thank you. Any other question? Yes, sir.
Is there a possibility that after the general conference you still won't have an answer?
Yes. So let me give you a possible scenario. I said earlier, in order to come to one conclusion out of 826 people who all think and believe differently, the best possible scenario is we could come up with one church plan and then stay as we are, then allow each other who they want to be without breaking the church apart. That, I believe, might be the best possible scenario. Second possible scenario is either General Conference choose revise traditional plan. In that case, maybe the liberal progressive part of the United Methodist Church may leave the denomination, or vice versa. And there are some group of people within our denomination called Wesleyan Covenant Association, which is very traditional group of people. Some of them say, we are leaving no matter what. And also a very extreme left wing, that is very liberal and progressive group of people, they say, we are leaving no matter what because we are sick and tired of being oppressed and not being treated fairly. Third possible scenario is there might be somebody at the General Conference bring in another petition. For example, somebody come to the General Conference floor and say, I move what's the term, that legal term, that we do away with all the rules. I have a brain freeze. Not the brain, what is it, brain fart or something? So somebody comes, hey, let's do away all the rules. And then somebody next person say, I second. And then he said, he get all those approval. And then second person come to the microphone say, hey, I'm JW from the Baltimore Conference. I move we adopt JW's plan. Do I have a second? And somebody says second. And then I give out all the JW's plan to the 820 some delegates. Tomorrow morning, we'll vote on that. And then we'll come back tomorrow and JW plan may be adopted. And then we end up coming home with a JW plan. Another possible scenario is we couldn't come up with any solution. We couldn't come up with any option that we adopt. And then we come home empty-handed. You may think, oh, that doesn't sound good, but we are very much similar to U.S. government, Congress, and then I hope it doesn't happen, but maybe some group of people could sabotage the whole process. So it is very hard to anticipate or sort of guess how it's going to turn out to be until you actually open the lid. But that's certainly one of the possibility. And I hope it doesn't happen that way because bringing everybody, about over 826 people, into a general conference is quite expensive and time-consuming, and we studied over a year. The Commission on Way Forward made up 32 people throughout all of the world, clergy, laity, member of LGBTQI, very traditional people, single person, gay people, married person, all possible situation of their lives came forward and made up a 32 people Commission on a Way Forward, and they studied about 2 years and brought forth these 3 options. And all those efforts, and we as a delegate studied and discussed and all those things, and it goes for nothing. That's really quite disappointing. And there might be some people quite angry about this. I'm afraid if we as a delegate come home empty-handed, then there might be angry people may leave the denomination. But the thing is, it all boils down to what our mindset is. Because let's say in early 1900, there was a issue with the women voting, ordination of women, and voting right of women, as well as the church has been separated over issue of slavery. Within our own tradition, church called Methodist Church struggled through all those things. But in the end, we all came back. We were able to make our denomination as one church. In other words, what I'm trying to say is these too shall pass. Is it that important as to believing in Jesus Christ and accept Christ as our Messiah? To me, as one individual person, no, I don't think so. I would like to stay together with my brothers and sisters and have faith journey together. Some of my friends may have different thoughts. So what? I'm married. My wife and I have been married for over 32 years. We still do not agree. And we found a way, even though we are different, we recognize the difference, but we still love each other. Otherwise, we might have been divorced a long time ago. I think pretty the same thing can be applied for our relationship with each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. If we focus on our difference, then it got just multiplied and maximized, and everything we see only the difference, and how I'm not satisfied with each other, with other person. But our focus is on positive thing. The things can be different. Any other question? So what I need you to do is keep the delegates and general conference in your prayer. There are a lot of rumors. One rumor is there is a group of people sabotage all this and trying to break the United Methodist Church into pieces. And I cannot bear to see, I love my church so much, I cannot bear to see that happen. This is a church that I made a covenant as an ordained person. And I made a covenant to I will serve this church as a body of Christ, no matter what. Literally until I die. That will break my heart to see the church is not in one piece. Oh, I forgot to mention another important thing. So there is a thing called the gracious exit in traditional plan. So our Book of Discipline has a trustee's clause saying, while the church is in operation, church can exercise the ownership of liquid and real estate property rights, But once the church is no longer be a United Methodist Church, either by closure or leaving, all the liquid asset, real estate, of every property goes back to the annual conference. The gracious exit is in part of the traditional plan that's saying that if the church, what the traditional plan saying is, if and when the traditional plan is adopted, any church does not want to remain within United Methodist Church, they can leave the denomination with their property. Not everything, but there is some things like there is certain the calculation method to allow each church and annual conference to leave the denomination. Some people say because they want to encourage the separation of church. But anyway, I want you to know that there is stuff like that. However, I would rather see this trustee clause were kept. The right to this property is only valid when a church remains as a United Methodist Church. But if they decide to leave our denomination, I do not believe that they can exercise the right to their property. So, our conference has about 6 clergy and 6 laity delegates to the General Conference. And I'm one of those 6 clergy delegates. I'm honored to be the delegate to the General Conference on behalf of our conference. And the question comes, are you representing our conference, majority of our conference opinion, or are you voting according to your own conscience? So that's a question that we get a lot. Our conference, understanding of our conference is we are not representatives. We are delegates. So we don't necessarily represent the majority of our conference. However, it is safe to say majority of our delegates from our Baltimore Washington Conference leaning toward the one church plan, because we like to stay together. So that's what I can tell you about our delegates from our conference, and I'm also leaning toward the one church plan. And probably you might have guessed it as I talk, because I would like to see our conference and our denomination stay together as one church. If my second option is one church plan, the simple plan, go back to pre-1972, just remove those condemning paragraphs, but allow each person to be who they are. Because I have a friend in very traditional faith. I have a friend, gay and lesbian friend. I can get along with everybody. And I do not believe that this issue should be the stumbling block of our congregation, our conference, and our denomination be separated from each other. All right, any other question? Final question? Thank you, and keep us, all 12 of us, and General Conference in your prayer. Thank you.